What is happening, baby? Welcome back to the Huddle Chat Sports Network's very own Fantasy Football Huddle, presented by Danklyfe brand and yours truly. Today, we are continuing our pre-draft ranking series. We're in early August. Now is the time to really start locking in on that fantasy football research because we're not waiting until September to build winning rosters. Right now is the time to get that leg up on all those other idiots in your fantasy football league because we're building a championship roster this season. And it's going to start here. We just finished our top 36 running backs. We're going to continue on to our top quarterbacks and tight ends, but today we're focused on the top 36 wide receivers in your fantasy football league. Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite you to fill up your cup, roll something up, and let's get right into the top 36 wide receivers. When we start these rankings, we are going to be going in a half-point PPR standpoint. I feel like it's a perfect middle ground for you to be able to adjust your rankings, whether you're in standard or a PPR league yourself. That way, it's very easy because, like I said, some of these wide receivers are going to be coming in, and we're going to talk about them as PPR monsters, as target hogs, as target vacuums, and those things are going to be adjustable in your PPR or non-PPR league by finding a nice middle ground with that half-point PPR. So adjust your rankings accordingly. Don't just blindly go off this half-point PPR standpoint if you're not playing in a half-point PPR league. Now, going with the top 36 wide receivers, we're going to start off with, of course, pick 101, most likely in your draft, Jamar Chase. You're not going to be unhappy going with Jamar Chase. You're looking at him having an over-under right now in Vegas of 1,305 yards. He's the number one wide receiver as far as a projected yard standpoint. He's coming off the Triple Crown Championship. He's in an offense that's going to have to pass a ton this year. You're looking at him having a pretty good schedule as well going into the season. All things are looking great for Jamar Chase, and all systems are go. I'm going with Jamar Chase in pick 101 if I have to pick 101. Moving on after that, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson are going to round out that top tier of wide receiver for us. You're looking at CeeDee Lamb. I think right now you're looking at him coming off of that 1,700-yard season, the last time him and Dak Prescott played a fully healthy season together. This season, you're looking at him and Dak Prescott coming into the season fully healthy. Dallas also has the number one pace of offense in the NFL coming out of last season. So you're looking at CeeDee Lamb having a lot of potential this season. Justin Jefferson is dealing with a few minor leg injuries at the current moment, and I just don't trust the quarterback play quite as much as I do with Jamar Chase or with CeeDee Lamb. But Justin Jefferson is still Jay Jettas. He's still one of the best wide receivers in the league. Thus, you're not going to be unhappy taking him in one of those first 6 picks in your draft. Moving on to that next tier of wide receivers, starting off with Nico Collins for the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans, plain and simple, are going to have to pass this year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's part of the reason why we lowered Joe Mixon in our rankings. When we talked about the top 36 running backs, you're looking at Nico Collins. He's a wide receiver one. You're looking at him coming off of a couple of great years. He's coming in healthy through this offseason. Now you're looking at him having that combination of a very safe floor and a ton of upside with how this Houston Texans offense can explode from week to week. But he also has that safe floor, like I said, and I think that the Houston Texans are going to have to pass a ton this year. Moving on to Puka Nacua, who's going to be wide receiver 5 for us. He is a PPR monster. He's an absolute target hog, and he's a route running animal. Also, he's projected the second most wide receiver yards in the NFL, according to Vegas at the current moment. Moving on behind Puka Nacua, I got Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra, he's a safe pick. If you're going risk averse, I love going with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's got a very high floor. He's finished as wide receiver 3, and wide receiver 7 over the last 3 seasons. Right now, you're putting him at wide receiver 6, right where he needs to be. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is definitely a wide receiver, definitely a player you would not be unhappy to have on your team. Rounding it out with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas to finish off this tier here of wide receivers from 4 to 8. This tier of wide receivers, I would be extremely happy to have 2 of these wide receivers. If I've got one of those late first-round picks and I can snag up Nico Collins and Amon-Ra St. Brown, oh my goodness, the league is going to be in trouble. This is that group where no matter where you go in your first pick, you want to snag one of these wide receivers if you can. And if you can, like I said, if you can double dip into this group of wide receivers, you can absolutely do that. I put Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. at the bottom of this list in this tier just because I don't trust their quarterback play, their pace of play, their offense as much as I trust the other offenses in the wide receivers above them. Then we got A.J. Brown starting off that next tier of wide receivers with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles, one of the hottest offenses in the NFL. A.J. Brown, one of the hottest wide receivers in the NFL. You can't go wrong with A.J. Brown. Now you got somebody I'm really excited about is Drake London from the Atlanta Falcons. He's plain and simple just going to be better with Michael Penix Jr. under center. You're looking at his touchdown upside being extremely high. He's got good pace of play in his offense. The Atlanta Falcons also have an extremely easy schedule when it comes to wide receiver matchups and things of that nature, at least on paper, going into the first week of the preseason. Now you're looking at Drake London. Like I said, his touchdown upside is extremely high. Drake London had a 39.4% red zone usage rate, which led the NFL last season. He was getting targeted almost 40% of the time in the red zone when it came to the Atlanta Falcons getting down there. So you're looking at Drake London. You can't go wrong with it. And another wide receiver who I think has extremely high upside is Ladd McConkey. You're hearing some lingering rumors that Keenan Allen might be making his surprise return to the Los Angeles Chargers, which I think would be a great move for Keenan Allen, but I don't think that would really make me adjust my rankings for Ladd McConkey that much. I might move Ladd McConkey around as far as my overall rankings, as far as my top 150 rankings, but as far as wide receiver, he's not moving out of that wide receiver that wide receiver 11 position. As far as whether Keenan Allen joins the team or not. Moving on to Jackson Smith-Njigba, of course, he's going to be another target vacuum there out in Seattle. And you're looking at Seattle no longer having DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, moving to that outside wide receiver where he seems to be a better wide receiver where he's played most of his career at. So you're looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba most likely having a really good breakout year as far as what he can do as the number one wide receiver on that team. Behind Jackson Smith is going to be T. Higgins, the number 2 wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I said about Jamar Chase, the defense puts the offense in a position where they have to pass the ball consistently. You're looking at Garrett Wilson being next here on my list for the New York Jets. You're looking at Garrett Wilson. At the current moment, I'm just kind of off all New York Jets. I don't really think it's safe to put your eggs in the New York Jets basket. However, Garrett Wilson is still going to be a wide receiver that's going to put up numbers. He's still the number 1 wide receiver in an offense that has a lot of potential to turn around and have more upside than it has had in the last few seasons. But Garrett Wilson, I currently am just off of most New York Jets at the current moment. Terry McLaurin at the current moment is underneath Garrett Wilson. I think he may eventually end up sliding back up above Garrett Wilson, maybe T. Higgins. He's going to be adjusted in my rankings. Right now, he's a little risky just because you do have that hold-in that he has right now, that contract dispute he has going on with the Washington Commanders. He's still in the building. He's not having a hold out. It seems that things are going to be getting worked out eventually. However, you're looking at the fact that if this does take too long, this might be something where you're looking at, we've seen it happen many times in the past, where if Terry McLaurin doesn't sign until the week before the season starts, he might have a slow start and be a little disappointing in those first couple of weeks just because he hasn't been able to get that connection with Jaden Daniels and with the offense that he should be in this time right now during training camp, during the preseason, where you're going to be making those mistakes and getting them out of the way before the regular season starts. Now, after Terry McLaurin, I want to ask you guys if you wouldn't mind smashing that like button one more time. And if you haven't yet, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscriptions bar as well as that notifications bell because we have all kind of information coming out your way. But moving on from Terry McLaurin, we're moving down to Devontae Adams, the new Los Angeles Ram, who I think is basically going to be the replacement for Cooper Kupp. You're looking at him, I don't think really changing my, like I said with Puka Nacua, I don't think he's going to be changing my rankings on Puka Nacua much, but he is going to add much needed depth as far as stretching the field goes to this offense, and I think he's going to be a perfect replacement for Cooper Kupp. Moving on behind Devontae Adams as a wide receiver, I'm even more excited about is going to be Mike Evans. I love Mike Evans. Everybody loves Mike Evans. You know what you get with Mike Evans, and that's straight consistency. You know what you're going to get out of that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. Now, you are looking at Mike Evans only being wide receiver 20 in games that Chris Godwin played in, and that's why right now I got him out about that wide receiver 17. You're looking at him having a really safe floor, but how high is his ceiling? A lot of people talk about the age and the cliff and things like that. I don't really like to get into that. We've seen so many people prove us wrong in recent history that I don't think age has a reason to do with why I'm putting Mike Evans outside of that top 12 into that 17 spot. And like I said, you're also looking at Emeka Egbuka, the new rookie wide receiver, making a lot of noise in this training camp as well. You're looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to be a good offense, but like I said, how high is the ceiling for Mike Evans? Behind Mike Evans, you look at Tyreek Hill from the Miami Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, you're looking at the Dolphins. I think most people have figured out Tyreek Hill, and they figured out the Dolphins. They figured out kind of how to stifle that passing attack. There's risk all over the Miami Dolphins passing attack. You still are going to have some explosive plays, explosive weeks from Tyreek Hill. However, I'm just off of the Miami Dolphins passing attack the same way I am about the New York Jets at the current moment. Moving on to Courtland Sutton, who just re-signed a new contract with the Denver Broncos. He's a rock-solid wide receiver, too. Not much can be said. You'd be extremely happy to have Courtland Sutton in your roster. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be my wide receiver 20, kind of starting out that top, that next tier of wide receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr., he has a lot of upside, but he also has a lot of risk. And I think the risk comes in with the coaching staff. You're looking at a lot of times last year, they were not able to create opportunity and be creative enough to really allow Marvin Harrison to get open before getting downfield. I don't think that much has changed in this coaching staff. That really leads me to believe that they aren't going to still lack a little bit of creativity this season going into this season. And that's why I think Marvin Harrison's ceiling is capped. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a great year this year. The talent is there. But like I said, I hesitate to believe that the offensive coordinator and the coaching staff can really create opportunities to get Marvin Harrison open in the playbook. Moving on from there, you're going to be looking at Devontae Smith from the Philadelphia Eagles, backup wide receiver, and a wide receiver that I'm extremely excited about, and a lot of people are talking a ton about. So you've probably heard a ton about Calvin Ridley at the current moment. You're looking at him. First of all, I love the value for Calvin Ridley, and I am higher on Calvin Ridley than most people are expert consensus ranking. He finished last season as wide receiver 29, and you're looking at him having a generally positive outlook amongst fantasy football experts. You're looking at him, of course, having the issues with who's going to play quarterback, but you're looking at Calvin Ridley playing really well last year, especially towards the end of the year. He's the clear number one wide receiver in this offense, and you can get him in round 6 or 7 and have amazing value coming out of this man. George Pickens from Dallas and Jameson Williams are going to be following that up here at my wide receiver 23, 24, wrapping up that top 24 wide receivers. Then we move on to Zay Flowers from the Baltimore Ravens. I think Zay Flowers, of course, the Ravens passing attack, he's going to be the number one wide receiver. The Ravens are going to be an explosive team, but they're not going to need to lean on Zay Flowers the way they're going to be leaning on Derrick Henry, Keaton Mitchell, and that running attack from Lamar Jackson at the quarterback position. But you do look at Zay Flowers. I just actually recently moved Zay Flowers above Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice because I trust Zay Flowers and the Lamar Jackson-led Ravens more than I trust the wide receiver situation in Kansas City, which we're getting into now. You see, I got Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice right next to each other. It's really hard to compare the two. I think the upside is very prevalent for Xavier Worthy, and it's going to be written into his draft stock at the current moment. You're looking at Rashee Rice having a ton of upside, but you also have the suspension looming for Rashee Rice. So you don't at the current moment know when, if, or how long you are going to be missing Rashee Rice if you decide to take Rashee Rice. And so as we get more information, of course, these rankings are going to be adjusted, but I think Xavier Worthy is going to be the better option over Rashee Rice, and that's why I have them ranked as such. Moving on from there, we have DK Metcalf, the new Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver. He's DK Metcalf. He's a great wide receiver. He's a physical wide receiver. He's a great red zone presence, and he's got a great Hall of Fame quarterback as Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. I think he has a very safe floor, but the ceiling remains capped just due to how the Pittsburgh Steelers, we have to see how the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be in the schedule, in this offense throughout the remainder of this year. Moving on, I got DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. It's very similar to that Kansas City Chiefs situation. DJ Moore is going to be the vet, the one that has the wide receiver one standpoint at the current moment. But Rome Odunze, the coaches have been singing his praises in training camp. Everything out of camp is saying Rome has been making the steps that he needs to make to potentially take that step up to be the number one wide receiver. Everybody loves Rome Odunze in Chicago at the current moment, and Rome Odunze is going to have to get the respect that he deserves. DJ Moore, people are going to be looking at him with the name and with the veteranship and with the experience, but Rome Odunze, I think, has more upside going into this season. Now, next is going to be a player that a lot of people have been really excited and getting a lot of hearing about. It's going to be Tetairoa McMillian from the Chicago Bears. As you see, that Chicago Bears wide receiver, they're all going to be set in that same spot. I mean, damn. Not the Chicago Bears wide receiver. Carolina Panthers wide receiver is going to be behind the Chicago Bears wide receivers in Tetairoa McMillian. You're looking at Tetairoa McMillian. If Bryce Young is going to take a step forward this year, it's going to be on the back of McMillian, this young wide receiver that they drafted with the number 8 pick. He's got a ton of talent. That's why they took him with that number 8 pick. And you're looking at Tetairoa McMillian. being an absolute stud coming out of training camp. And I'm really excited to potentially get a piece of this in some of my leagues this year. Now, moving on behind that, wrapping things up is a lot of wide receivers. These next few wide receivers, I essentially consider them value picks, except for Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, of course, being a value pick, but you're looking at Travis Hunter, you don't really know what's going to happen, how they're going to use him, and if they continue to do what they've been doing in training camp and playing him on both sides of the ball. That's tight. That's so cool. However, you're getting more risk. The more he plays, the more snaps that he's playing, and the more snaps he's playing that aren't helping out your fantasy football team. That's more opportunity for him to take an injury, to be tired, to not be able to break away on that field. We've seen him play in Colorado. I'm not doubting the skills that Travis has, but it's going to be a little bit different having to get up after tackling Derrick Henry and then trying to go out and run a touchdown. We just don't know how the usage is not a clear picture on Travis Hunter at the current moment. I still think Travis Hunter deserves some respect. However, Travis Hunter, I do think I'm going to be leaning back on him until I get a little bit more information. But you're looking at Chris Olave, Jacoby Myers, Jawan Jennings, Jalen Waddle, finishing off that top 36 wide receivers. Like I said, they're all value picks. Chris Olave is going to be great value. He's extremely undervalued at the current moment. You're looking at him being somebody that I'd be extremely happy with as my wide receiver 3, as my flex. What really gives you cause to pause is he's got a lot of quarterback questions on a not so great team. So Chris Olave, of course, you're going to stifle your expectations for him. You're going to stifle your expectations for Rashid Shaheed. But I think Chris Olave is going to be a great value pick at this point. And it's going to be the same thing about Jacoby Myers, another player that people have been talking about with nonstop praise coming into this fantasy football season. I think he's undervalued at the current moment. I got him ranked above Jalen Waddle, and I recently just moved Jalen Waddle all the way down to 36. Jawan Jennings, I think, has a lot more potential without Deebo Samuel being there. Looking at Jawan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk being the 1-2 punch that the San Francisco 49ers need at their wide receiver position. And I think that it's going to be extremely big year for Jawan Jennings. And if you get Jawan Jennings as your wide receiver 3 in your flex position, you're going to be extremely happy with it. Now, wrapping things up, of course, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said, we just finished our top 36 running backs, and we are going to be getting into our top quarterbacks, top tight ends, and we're going to be discussing some defense play as well. When you're looking at things here, going into your fantasy football season, like I said, it's the important time of the year. We're getting into that draft, that draft time, that pre-draft ranking research. So make sure never be afraid to drop any comments below. I've got a few comments that we're going to be responding on my next video from last night's episode. I just didn't have the time to get to them on today's episode. Don't want to waste any more of y'all time. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Make sure you always keep your chins up and your attitudes down. I'm gonna see y'all next time.